I was 6 months pregnant when I broke the only rule my husband ever gave me. Don't open the cabin at the tree line. I didn't plan it. Not the timing, not the trembling, not the way the key stuck to my palm as if it could still feel his heat. 3 months earlier, I scattered Michael's ashes across our lake in the Adirondacks. The water was a flat sheet of pewter, cold enough to hold a secret forever. Family history, he used to say about that cabin, smiling soft, disarming. I let the smile win for 8 years. Grief changed the math. That morning, sunlight spilled through cream curtains onto our bed, onto a silver-framed wedding photo. Me in a simple dress with wildflowers in my hair. Michael, tall and precise in charcoal. I pressed the glass to the swell of my belly. What were you hiding? The baby rolled, a slow wave under my ribs, as if to say, move. The key wasn't in a safe. It was in the small wooden box above the hall closet, where he kept old house spares and a cracked tape measure. An antique brass thing, heavier than modern metal, notched like a tiny blade. He never mentioned it. He hid it where I'd eventually look, where grief would eventually drive me. The path down to the edge of our property had grown over since July. Pine needles hushed my steps. Something sweet and metallic rode the wind, like rain before it breaks. I talked to him the way I always did now, aloud, as if the trees ran a telephone line to wherever he'd gone. I never understood why you wouldn't bring me here, I said. The boulder at the bend flashed a glint. I bent and found a compass. Not a normal one. The brass case was engraved with symbols that felt older than the mountains. I turned in a slow circle. The needle didn't care about north. It cared about the cabin. When the roof came into view, low, moss-covered, windows filmed in grime, I felt watched, not hunted, witnessed. The porch sighed under my weight. My hand shook as I set the key. The lock turned too easily, as if someone had oiled it last night. One breath, one last moment to honor a dead man's boundary. I pushed. The air that met me smelled like paper and dust and ozone. Dust motes swam in a shaft of light. What I saw wasn't family history. It was a lab. Maps tiled the walls in overlapping scales, the same valley, red-X'd again and again across different decades. Books, not our kind of books, astronomy, theoretical physics, Mohawk, and Abenaki lore, bristled with tabs in Michael's careful hand. A ham radio glowed without being plugged in. A tarp covered something bulky in the center of the room. Everything was meticulous, crowded, alive. Michael, I whispered, and heard the room hold the name. On the desk, a leather journal. His script, upright, patient, began normal. Local history, geological notes, storm patterns. Then it tilted. Confluence. Temporal displacement. Doorways! Pages were torn out. One was singed, as if he'd tried to burn it and spared it at the last breath. Some discoveries aren't meant for the world. What happens at the cabin must stay contained. For everyone's safety. For Sarah's safety. For my safety. A floorboard near the radio looked new. I pried it up with shaking fingers and found a small wooden box on velvet. Inside, a crystal the size of a robin's egg. It kept changing, clear to ocean blue to the color the sky turns before night. It hummed in my palm like a tiny heart. I set it on a map labeled in his hand. Primary nexus, temporal confluence. The crystal vibrated. Thin blue threads lit up across the paper like veins. A carved puzzle box on the desk woke up, symbols glowing, pieces sliding with soft clicks, then opened a little mouth just big enough for the crystal. My fingers moved before my fear could vote. I dropped the crystal in, the box purred, the symbol spun, and then his voice. Protocol 7. Sarah, if you found this, then something happened to me. I forgot how to breathe. He was in the room and not. Calm, urgent, my Michael. He spoke of confluence points where reality thins, of patterns changing, of a man named James who could help me if the worst had happened. Be careful who you trust, he said, and the message buckled like a radio hit by lightning. The crystal flashed red. Somewhere in the cabin, an instrument began to shriek. Under the storm rumble, a human sound rose, the rap, rap, rap of knuckles on wood. Michael, I blurted. Hope, a reflex I couldn't kill. Hello? A man called from the porch. I saw light. Are you... Michael? I touched the box with both hands like prayer. The The crystal flicked one last time and went dark. I buried my husband in July. So how did he email someone last week? I'm Sarah, I said through a crack in the door. Michael's wife. Silence. Then softer, like he was rearranging facts in his head. I'm James Harlow. Michael and I work together. He looked wrong for danger. Wire-rimmed glasses, hiking pack, hair, at war with the wind. But his eyes kept moving, measuring. He glanced at my belly and swallowed a question. May I come in? Talk there. I kept the door braced with my foot. He pulled a device from his pocket, like a compass married to a Geiger counter. A bead raced the dial. The device clicked in a steady, unnerving heartbeat. Confluence is active, he said, mostly to himself. That's why the radio's humming. Confluence, I repeated. The word tasted like electricity. James met my eyes. He didn't tell you. He told me to find you. He told me to be careful who I trust. I let the sentence sit like a trap between us. He nodded once, something like grief shadowing his face. He always assumed you'd be the one to put it together. He scrolled his phone and turned the screen. From Michael Calloway. Date, October 5th. Lines of numbers and symbols, and a short note at the bottom. Stability dropping. Next peak, soon. 3.17. Keep Sarah safe. Michael died on July 10th, I said. I found him on our kitchen floor. James shook his head as if denial could rearrange the calendar. Or something else happened. Something you and I need to prove fast. Inside, under my stare, he moved like he'd been there before, past the maps to the long bookshelf. His fingers traced the wood in a pattern my eyes couldn't follow. With a hush of hidden hinges, the entire case slid aside. Behind it, a narrow room waited like a lung you didn't know your house had. The walls were gridded with Polaroids, each labeled in Michael's block print. Dates, times, numbers. The same forest clearing stared back 1,000 different ways. Rocks shifted, light colder, a birch on the left missing, then present again. In the center, a tripod contraption aimed at where a door might hang if the wall weren't stone. The observer, James said. Michael built it to measure the fluctuations. We found a thin place. Not ghosts, not miracles, physics. On the corner desk, a digital recorder, a sealed envelope with my name, and a note in his hand. If I don't return. My throat burned. I slit the envelope with my nail. Sarah, if you're reading this, 2 things happened. I'm gone, and you came anyway. I owe you the truth. The cabin sits at the edge of a confluence, where the weave between realities loosens. We proved information can pass. Objects, sometimes. People, under conditions I can't write without risk. There's a date you must remember, October 15th, 3:17 p.m. If I haven't returned by then, it may be your only chance to see me or to understand what I tried to do. Trust your instincts. Be careful who you trust. I love you. Emma pressed the letter to my chest and felt the baby kick beneath it. Answer and question. James gave me the room, but not the silence. His device kept clicking. The desk had a locked drawer. The postscript on Michael's letter sent my hand searching under the observer's plate. Tape. A key. The drawer side open. A hard drive. A thicker journal. And a portable camera whose last thumbnail preview was July 7th. We didn't breathe while the video buffered. The cabin on screen looked exactly like the one we stood in, except for the man at the desk. He looked at the lens, the way he looked at me across a pillow. Serious, tender, worried I hadn't eaten enough that day. Final log before attempt, he said. Confluence peak at 0200. I'll cross to retrieve medical data from B7 and return within 48 hours. If you're seeing this, something went wrong. He leaned closer. Sarah, everything I've done is for you and our child. October 15th, 3:17 p.m. Stone arch in the north clearing. If there's a way back, I'll find it. The video ended. The room heard both our heartbeats. You said medical data, I whispered. From where? James's face changed. Not kinder, truer. From B7. A parallel variant a few months ahead of us. In that variant, a lethal congenital heart defect appears in newborns across this region. Michael discovered your baby carries the marker. My hands found my belly, bracing like I'd been shoved. He crossed to save our child. James nodded. B7 developed screening and an in utero treatment our hospitals won't know for months or years. He went to bring it home. Then who did I bury? He held my look and didn't flinch. Maybe. Not your Michael. The word detonated after a long, cold click. If a door opens one way, it opens the other, and something else might walk through. James didn't flood me with theory. He gave me proof. The autopsy report I half remembered through benzos and casseroles. Unusual cellular degradation, the coroner had murmured, blaming delay. Now James's words shifted its meaning. Molecular destabilization, he said softly. A known risk of unprotected cross-reality transfer. I sank into Michael's old chair and imagined what it meant to be nearly the same, but not quite. To die gasping in a stranger's kitchen that smelled almost like your own. We call it a mirror event, James said. Two counterparts attempt to cross simultaneously. They can swap coordinates. Sometimes they're thrown to a place of personal significance, not the physical gate. A kitchen, a bedroom. Our kitchen, I said, and the room tilted. He placed a folder in my lap. Time-stamped photos of men in unmarked gear threading our woods, equipment that did not belong at a campsite. We're not alone in this, he said. Energy signatures like these get noticed. Government, private, I can't say which. But they're close. When? My voice was steady. It surprised me. Soon. He checked his device. The clicking had become a quicker pulse. Tonight if they're bold. Tomorrow when the peak builds. I looked at the hard drive, at the letter, at the boxes of a life I never knew my husband lived. What do? We prepare for 317, James said. We secure what matters, and we leave before anyone else arrives to take the things they don't understand. He moved fast, hands practiced. We stripped the observer for the storage that couldn't be reproduced from schematics, slid the most critical notebooks into packs, photographed map walls in quick chains, powered down the ham radio. I slid the crystal from the puzzle box. It warmed against my skin like a small animal, and, for a breath, I thought I heard him again. Michael saying my name like a promise. I almost answered out loud. I didn't. Night should have been black and thick. Instead it hummed. The cabin's windows glowed from inside our heads. A twig snapped near the porch. Another. The door crashed wide. Boots thudded. Flashlight swept the lab, then the hidden room. James lifted the workbench with a grunt, revealing a trapdoor I never knew existed. Root cellar, he whispered. Old mining shaft connects to a west exit. I hesitated a second, not for the men above, but for everything the room had held of my husband's private courage. I'm sorry, I told the lab. I would have come with you. We crawled under our life and left it there. The tunnel breathed damp and minerals, the flashlight jittering on timber ribs. Above us, voices. 2 heat signatures, bag the drives. And this, what is this? Boots, careless with what they didn't understand. Half a mile west, James eased a camouflaged hatch and pulled me into ferns and air. We moved down slope through old deer paths, then side-hilled where the duff wouldn't show tracks. He led like someone who'd mapped this forest in more than one reality. I followed like someone whose lungs had learned a new rhythm. Inhale, protect the baby. Exhale, get to 317. We stopped in a pocket of hemlocks so dense the night felt stitched shut. James checked his device. The beat had swung to a new tempo. He stared as if it had spoken. The confluence is accelerating, he said. Faster than I predicted. What does that mean? That Michael may try to come through earlier, he looked at me. Or that someone else will. The hemlocks pressed around us. Somewhere to the east, vehicles rumbled faint on gravel. I touched the crystal. It answered with a pulse I felt in my wrist. Or my pulse answered it, and I wanted the lie. You could have told me sooner, I said finally. Anger was a warm thing in cold woods. About any of this, he could have. James didn't defend himself. Operational security, Hinfo, he said. And love, both can become cruel without meaning to. We slept in sips. At dawn, the birds did not sing. He led me to the clearing I'd seen in 100 Polaroids. A stone arch rose in the center, 2 slabs leaning like ancient shoulders. The air beneath it blurred, as if the world was a photograph and the negative double exposed right there. This is it, he said. The primary nexus. We set the crystal in a box cradle under the arch. We wired nothing to nothing and made the air listen. "This broadcasts our signature," he explained, fingers quick. "Two crystals are entangled. Yours here, Michael's there. Regardless of distance, they respond together. He homes in on us, not just any version." "Entangled," I said. "Like marriage." He didn't smile. "Like fate, if you're generous." We waited. At noon, the air under the arch began to move, like heat off asphalt, except it was October and nothing was warm. By 2, tiny differences flickered through the opening, this forest, but with edits. A birch where our map said oak, a trail scar that did not exist. James's device sang a steady high tone that sharpened the edges of my teeth. He worked with the practiced grace of someone who had failed before and survived it. Sensors feathered the stones, cables formed a half halo, the box with the crystal pulsed blue, brighter with each minute. "We're at 60% of maximum," he said. "Stability's good." "What happens if he misses it?" I said. James didn't look up. "Then the window closes, next peak is weeks out. But the pattern is drifting, there's no guarantee there will be a next." I didn't say I couldn't carry that. I rubbed the place on my belly where the baby's foot liked to insist on itself. He pushed back, a small, stubborn hello. At 3 o'clock, the air under the arch was no longer our air. It was a sheet of light, veined and living. The trees beyond were not our trees. The ground sound felt wrong, like someone else walking in socks upstairs. 3 minutes, James said. "Remember, do not touch the boundary." I nodded. I didn't promise. The world closed around a noise I hadn't heard in 3 months, the rhythm of a second heartbeat that my body recognized as belonging. It didn't make sense. Bodies don't hear through realities. Grief doesn't raise the dead. But my skin knew before my mind did. "Michael." Something small tumbled through the light and clinked on stone. I didn't need to pick it up to know. Wedding rings have a sound they make when they leave home. I scooped it anyway. The inside of the band was engraved the way we'd done it on a cheap day in May. S and M, forever means try. 30 seconds, James hissed. Stability wobble, hold, okay. A human outline resolved in the light the way a person walks out of fog. Tall, left shoulder slightly higher from an old teenage fall, the way he leaned into the world like he meant to be there. "Michael," I shouted, and the forest ate the last syllable. He lifted his head as if he'd heard. The energy convulsed. He took a step and didn't move at all, like running in water. 10, James called. 8, 7. I stepped closer. "Don't," James snapped, "but there is a point past which you don't obey, not because you are brave, but because you are married." My fingertips brushed the light. Pain struck like a live wire. Behind it, a flood. His fear, his choosing, his math, his love. "Sarah, baby, danger." Words like stones flung across a river you can't swim and still try. He lunged. The field clenched. The arch moaned. For a breathless second that had no clock, he was half in and half out, outlined in blue lightning, this reality stitching to the other through the organ of his body. Then the world thundered. The field collapsed like a tent cut loose. I flew backward into pine needles. When the high noise died, a new one took its place. The awful, ordinary sound of a man trying to breathe on hands and knees. I crawled, palms burning, and touched his face. There are many ways to say home. His eyes found mine and chose the simplest. "You're okay," he rasped, and his gaze dropped to the roundness beneath my jacket with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. "The baby." "We're okay," I said, my voice breaking into more parts than a word should have. "You made it back." He nodded once, dazed. "Molecular recalibration," he muttered. "Give me a minute and I'll belong to this place again." Engines growled in the distance. James's head snapped toward the sound. "We have to move," he said. "Now." Michael's hand fumbled in his coat, pulled out a device that looked like a phone built by someone who didn't care what phones looked like. He pressed it into my palm. "Everything," he said. "Diagnostics, treatment, protocol, backup keys. Don't lose it." "Try not to die," I said, and tried to laugh and failed and helped the 2 men I trusted in different ways In his pocket, my husband carried a photograph of a life I didn't live, and it convinced me we had to burn a bridge behind. We moved through the understory, the way animals do. James cut sign in quick glances. I offered quiet curse and roots reached for my ankle. Michael recovered in stutters, every 20 paces, shoulders loosening, breath less ripped. "Tell me everything after," I said. "Tell me what happened when you stepped through." Later, Sound cares. Eyes. Now, I said. And Michael laughed once, hoarse. Yes, ma'am. The crossing hit the course. I arrived in B7 within a 3-meter mark. The shift was obvious. Gravity in my joints like I'd slept wrong. One other difference. He reached into his pocket and handed me the small, creased rectangle. The woman in the photo was me, and not me. Same bone, same mouth, but her eyes carried. She stood beside a man who was Michael, and not, holding a bundle that was the grief in the end gave me that. It's how he convinced me to hurry when the math told me to. Their son, our son there, died at 3. Defect they never saw come. M and S. Some objects make promises you don't say out loud. Grief is its own confluence. He was at the arch every day, hearing the way sorrow tried. He took a breath like a man. Sounds like you. Compared notes. Research was months ahead because they had a motive ours didn't. A cemetery full of tiny reasons to work faster. He gave me everything. The screening. Protocol. The in utero correction, a way to package it so our doctors wouldn't dismiss it as fiction. When it came time to leave, he faltered. We felt our window go strange. Interference, James said. They felt it too. Worse, their authorities had begun to sniff it. Ours had men in the trees, the pattern distorted, like a bridge being tested by more weight than it was built for. Mirror, I said. The word scraped coming out. Michael nodded. We coordinated to avoid it. But you can only aim so well when the world is the gun. I threw my ring first, a lock. Then I took the step. I felt something else take one in the same instant from somewhere else. We almost braided together in the field. He didn't say the rest. He didn't have to. We had both stood in the same kitchen and learned what a mirror event does to a body. The engines grew louder, then faded, then reappeared somewhere we weren't. James adjusted course twice. We gained the old service road where he'd left a truck under a fallen hemlock, and by luck or planning, it still had 4 tires and a key. As we bump crawled onto county pavement, Michael watched the trees like a man expecting them to reach in. They will keep looking, he said, and they will keep building machines to look better. We don't have to teach them how to open a door just because we learned, I said. The house we drove to wasn't ours. That was the point. A friend of a friend. Cash, keys, a stocked fridge like a favor remembered. We blacked out the windows and ate standing up. Michael set the device on the table like a sacrament. The data is clean, he said. It will pass muster in our world, but we need a physician who'll do what is right and ask questions later. We have one, I said. I named the man who had taught Michael to see numbers like music years before our life rerouted into the woods. James took first watch. The baby kicked like applause against my palm while I lay on a borrowed couch and learned how to sleep next to a returned man. In the morning, we made calls, quiet, surgical calls. By evening, the first appointments had been set. Screening, then treatment. We didn't discuss contingency plans. We already lived inside one. When the baby rolled again, I held the photo of the other Sarah where he would have a face and thanked a woman I would never meet for a fight we could finish. The first time I saw our son's heart on a screen, I understood exactly what my husband had risked. The clinic smelled like lemon and caution. Our doctor, a man with steady hands and a practiced poker face, closed the blinds, locked the door, and said the kind of sentence careers end on. Show me what you have, and I'll decide if I can live with it. Michael laid out B7's science in a language that made it look boring. Acronyms, baselines, blind-coded trials. Then he made it human. This mutation hides until it kills, he said, voice steady. They learned to see it sooner. The device served up data with polite certainty. The doctor narrowed his eyes, then widened them, then put on new glasses as if the first pair had been afraid to witness. He ordered our tests with a speed that told me he had already chosen. I watched the monitor. I listened to the watery drum, and I saw it, the shadow that wasn't a shadow, the thin defect that in one world would have taken our son. My body wanted to leap off the table and fight with teeth and nails. Instead, I held still while medicine caught up to love. In the parking garage, under concrete and fluorescent hum, I asked the question I'd been circling. Do you miss it? Michael knew what I meant. Not the cabin, not the gear, the horizon. The ache that comes when the world is bigger than your life. He looked at my belly and then at the ramp that led back to daylight. Sometime, he said. Then I remember why we did it, and the ache shrinks to something I can carry. James texted sparingly. Always from new numbers, always short. They're still in the forest. Don't go back. We didn't. We moved houses twice, quietly as a change of weather. Our original home became a decoy. A shell where agents could clip hedges and pretend a family would return any minute. At a borrowed garage workbench, Michael stripped and repurposed what we'd carried out of the cabin. He unlearned how to build a door and learned how to make toys for a child who needed wonder more than danger. The day the procedure finally came, the world went so still that even the nurses whispered softer. They explained it like you would to people who needed to feel like they had power. Choices, protocols, safety nets. We signed our names like drawing sword points. Michael watched the clock, watched me, watched the hands that touched our future. After, when the doctor said, "It worked," he didn't mean the room would never know fear again. He meant we had dragged a child across an unseen border into a better outcome, and the math agreed. In the weeks that followed, we dismantled the last evidence. The cabin was emptied. The puzzle box turned to inert wood and memory. The crystal, the key that made arrogant men imagine they could rule worlds, was broken into harmless shards and carried to places with no map legend. 3 states, 4 streams, 1 fragment whittled so small it could be mistaken for glitter. James disappeared on purpose. If anyone asks, his last message read, "I study beetles now." He left us with a piece of good advice that sounded like a lullaby. Be boring. We tried. We bought groceries and a secondhand crib and a coffee maker that lied that it was new. We learned the names of cashiers and dogs. We stopped reading the news about the Adirondacks because the headlines told us the same thing each week with different verbs. Search intensifies. Energy mystery deepens. Officials tight-lipped. Doors you can detect are not the same as doors you can open. We exhaled. On a Tuesday, while Michael debated the engineering of a baby mobile, I took the photo of the other Sarah into the backyard and spoke aloud to a woman in a different air. "We did it," I told her. "Your grief built a bridge. We crossed our son to safety. Thank you." Wind moved through the maple in a way that sounded like yes. That night, when the baby kicked as if testing new space, Michael knelt and pressed his forehead to me. "We could have lost him," he said. "We didn't," I said, and learned what it means for triumph to arrive quietly like sleep. You don't cross a world and return without bringing a little of the other weather with you. Some nights he woke sweating, counting in a base that wasn't 10. He'd hold out his hands like a man gauging a doorway and then laugh at himself softly. "Ghost measurements, hey Baum," he'd say. My bones remember different gravity. In the grocery store, a fluorescent buzz would turn his head because in B7, the lights made a different complaint. He once misnamed a street, the B7 version's title escaping before ours. Ordinary things tripped small alarms. The taste of our coffee, ours was better. The smell of our rain, ours was lighter. The way time kept almost skipping when the microwave hit 17. We learned to build rituals, hand on baby, hand on table, say the date out loud, say each other's middle names. Angel anchors, he called them. Points weighted enough to pull a drifting ship back to the right current. I handled the other aftershocks. The ones in me. Rage, bright and stupid, at a man who had loved me so much he had left me. Gratitude that tasted like guilt. Relief that came with a stowaway. The knowledge that there is a reality next door where everything is identical except the part that is not. I stood in doorways and felt both blessed and haunted. One evening, fog pooled in the backyard like milk. Michael soldered tiny stars to a wire armature for the mobile. "You never answered," he said without looking up. "Do you hate me a little?" "For leaving," I said. "Or for coming back?" "Either." I told him the truest answer I had. "I hate the math. I love the motive." He nodded like a man finally given the grade he expected. News from the mountains went quiet. Silence is its own report. We drove once, far around the region, just to feel the change of air. State troopers ran checkpoints like it was hunting season. The forest looked ordinary. That's the trick thin places play. They hide inside ordinary, so you only find them by looking wrong. We didn't go back to the cabin, but we drove past a lake that looked like our lake and didn't stop. We counted cows and orange mailboxes like a game. We were practicing boring. On the way home, the baby hiccuped in a rhythm that felt like applause. Michael tapped the wheel in counterpoint. "Sometimes I think of him," he said softly, "the other me, the one who stayed, the one who sent me home." "Me too," I said, and watched the road hold steady. We sent a package to a far address that meant something only to 2 men with the same face. A set of notes, a photograph of our son's ultrasound, and 1 sentence on a card. "Your grief saved him. We are keeping our promise. No reply would ever come. That was the point. But on the day the mail should have arrived in that other world, our baby slept with his mouth open in a smile I had never seen before. Call it coincidence, or call it a thin kindness. Knowledge is a credit card with no spending limit, and the interest comes due in ways you don't predict. Our doctor called from a different phone. A researcher I trust wants to ask about the data's provenance, he said. He won't push. He's just the sort of mind that wakes up at night wondering how the world fits. No, Michael said gently. Tell him it came from nowhere and led to life. We had solved a problem by borrowing from a future that wasn't ours. That fact glittered like a coin in the corner of every room. If we used it once, why not twice? Cures, designs, investments, bets, hundreds of choices that could cheat the house, each one pulled at the fabric we lived under. Slippery slope, I said one night. Greased, Michael answered. We drew a line in the simplest place, our family. We would use what we brought back to keep our child alive and then lock the rest behind a door only weather could open. We would not feed the machine that had chased us through the trees. We would not build tools for men who loved power more than people. We would not become a story that ended with a mushroom cloud or a lab no one could enter without praying. That didn't mean the machine stopped. There were sightings in the news, always secondhand, always denied. Hunters who saw lights, hikers who felt the air go wrong, a dog that wouldn't cross a particular clearing. We listened and didn't go. We had chosen our door. James sent one last packet, months later, from a postal ghost box 3 cities away. A few photos, a clean map with 3 X's where he'd found surveillance gear pulled up and gone. They're not done, his note said. They're only delayed. I burned the paper over the sink, not because it was evidence, but because fire sometimes makes thoughts behave. Michael taught math at a small school now. He wrote on whiteboards with a squeak I could hear even when I wasn't there. Students adored him because he taught numbers like they were stories with choices. He never once said the word confluence. He did say responsibility a lot. When he built the mobile for the crib, he carved planets from soft wood, sanded them sweet, painted them with the patience you save for small things. At the center, he hung a fleck of something so tiny only he and I would ever know. Not enough to power anything, just enough to remember. Is that wise? I asked, because truth needs 2 people to keep it honest. It keeps me grateful, he said. The night before our son was born, the moon was a comma. I couldn't sleep. I walked the house and felt how many lives a space can hold. Grief, relief, ordinary happiness. I passed the mobile and watched it turn, quiet, balanced, like the model of a universe that only had room for 3. I thought of the cabin, as it must be now. Empty walls, breathing dust, and a slow animal deep under the earth where the mine once ran. I pictured men in labeled jackets holding instruments that worked perfectly and told them nothing. I pictured the arch in the clearing, the air under it behaving like air again. I pictured the other Sarah, somewhere I would never be, setting a new place at a table that had an empty seat and calling it healing. The baby turned. My body said, enough philosophy. Make room. He arrived pink and loud and furious, alive in a way that felt like a whole weather system had chosen our house. They put him on my chest, and the first thing he did was grab Michael's shirt like he'd been rehearsing in utero. The second thing he did was sneeze, an explosion that made the nurse laugh and me cry. "Thomas!" I said. It fit his mouth. Michael looked at both of us like a man who had just heard the best proof a theorem could have. Something true in practice and not just on paper. Our doctor cried in the hallway and pretended he didn't. He came back in with a respectable cough and said words we already knew. Healthy. Strong. No sign of the defect. He didn't ask where the cure came from. He only kissed Thomas's foot like a grandfather and signed the chart. We took Thomas home through weather that couldn't decide if it was rain or light. He slept with his mouth open like the photo of the other Sarah had promised a different child would somewhere. The mobile spun its soft astronomy. The crib learned the weight of a life it had waited for. At 3 a.m., while I fed him and counted the tiny swallows, I saw a number on the stove clock. 3:17. I almost laughed. I almost cried. I kissed his hair and told the universe it didn't need to be clever anymore. We got the message. The first weeks folded into each other like sheets. Time became a loop of feed, change, doze, marvel. Michael's hands never shook, not even when he cut Thomas's nails, which are as treacherous and small as angel knives. He hummed math under his breath. the kind that sounds like lullabies if you're not paying attention. We moved again because that's what people who have been chased do when they hear a far siren that isn't for them. Our new town had a diner that knew how I take my eggs by week 2. The neighbor's dog decided we belonged. The mail came late on Tuesdays, and we pretended to be annoyed so we could be ordinary. Sometimes I caught Michael watching the window with that far look. "Not regret," he said when I asked. A kind of respect for the size of what we touched. "Do you ever want to go back?" I asked. "To the cabin?" "No." He shifted Thomas to his shoulder with a motion I could watch forever. "To the feeling, sometimes." Then he hiccups, and I remember it's here now. We mailed birth announcements to exactly 8 people. One of them was addressed to a name that exists only in a story, in care of a place that cannot receive mail. We sent it anyway. Inside, a photo. Thomas in a blue knit cap. On the back, "He's here. You helped." The sky that day was the clean blue you get after a storm, decides it has done enough. Temptation doesn't knock, it texts. An email arrived from a name I didn't recognize, but the subject line knew too much. Observations near North Clearing. The body was polite, credentialed, predatory. "I believe you and your late husband had an interest in anomalous energy fields. I am working with a task force. Your insights could be invaluable." Michael read it and closed the laptop like it was a mouth. "Delete," he said. I did. Then I emptied the trash. Then I unplugged the router and stared at the blank space where the email had been like it might still be humming. 2 days later, a woman at the grocery store said, "I saw you on the news once, I think." I dropped a cantaloupe and lied. We get that a lot. The machine didn't know our address, but it knew we existed. We took James's advice and leaned harder into boring. We joined the library. We bought a hand-me-down stroller and pretended to dislike the squeak. We invited neighbors who over-apologized for their loud kids and immediately loved our loud one. When we argued, it was about dishes. When we made up, it was about everything else. On a morning foggy enough to blur the world into suggestion, I walked Thomas by the river and thought about the line we'd drawn. Protect family, close the door. It sounds clean until you carry it. Then you see all the places it smudges. What if another disease? What if a fire? What if a war? The mind can always find a new emergency and call it justification. I tucked the blanket under Thomas's chin and said the rule aloud so it could be real. "We don't open doors we can't close." The universe didn't respond. It didn't need to. It had already made its position clear. Power loves to be used. Responsibility loves to be chosen. At home, Michael had set up a small project in the garage, a mobile prototype he wanted to gift to a student who'd just become a father. He held up a carved moon. "What do you think?" "I think you're dangerous with a sander," I said, and kissed his sawdust ear. That night, while Thomas slept under his appointed stars, I dreamed of the cabin. In the dream, it was whole again, humming. I stood in the doorway with the crystal in my hand and felt the old ache. Then I opened my fist and watched it dissolve like sugar. When I woke, the ache had dulled to something almost like relief. We did one last thing. We wrote down everything we remembered that could keep a future finder from hurting themselves. Not equations, warnings. The kind of notes you leave at the top of a cliff, loose rock. Do not trust your balance. The view is not worth the drop. We sealed it in an envelope and gave it to a lawyer with instructions to deliver it to no one unless the world changed in ways we could not predict. "Insurance?" Michael asked when we exited into clean, cold air. "Mercy," I said. Some thank yous don't have a forwarding address. Months had taught us. The rhythm of 3. Michael left early to teach and learned to love thermoses. I learned to nap with Thomas without judging myself. Thomas learned to hold his own bottle and lorded it over us like a dictator with a new law. On a Tuesday, the mailman left a package the size of a book with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, the clearing, snow-draped, the arch, a white grin. On the back, in a hand I could have mistaken for Michael's if I didn't know better. "Winter is a good time for doors to rest." No signature, no demand, just a line drawn in weather. I showed it to Michael. He touched the corner like it might cut. "Do we reply?" "How?" I said. "There's no address. We could send something to the same nowhere." "Like a truce," I said. We wrote on a postcard with a farmhouse and a fake address. Understood. It felt like dropping a coin in a well that doesn't echo. But something in the house relaxed after we mailed it, as if we'd acknowledged a neighbor we wouldn't invite in but wouldn't ignore either. James, ghost that he is, sent one last message through a friend of a friend. A photograph of beetles, as promised, and a 4-word note. Be well. Be small. The photo lived on our fridge. It helped. The words did too. I held both pictures, the arch in winter and the dumb, beautiful beetles, and realized how much of our salvation had come down to humility. We didn't master the door. We didn't monetize it. We didn't explain it on television. We loved one person enough to say no to 1,000 yeses. That night, the house was so quiet I could hear the mobile turn. Do you miss him? I asked Michael, and we both knew I didn't mean James. I carry him, he said. Like a twin under the skin. He tapped his chest twice. We share a heartbeat some days. I nodded. Then maybe he knows. Maybe, he said. And we let the maybe be large enough. Some mysteries are miracles because they open. Ours became one because we chose to close it. Spring arrived like the apology winter always owes. Trees ran green. The river lost its edge. On Saturday, the 3 of us sprawled on the living room floor and let sunlight ladder across our legs. Thomas gurgled like a creek thinking about itself. Michael had built a new mobile for the student, this one even calmer than ours. He held it up and watched planets he'd sanded spin into physics good enough for a baby. The fleck in ours, the harmless memory, caught a stray beam and flashed once. I didn't flinch. It was the kind of light you get when you forgive a thing that wasn't exactly at fault. Do you ever miss the lab? I asked, because asking is a way of testing your own honesty. He didn't answer fast. When he did, he looked not at the mobile but at Thomas's fingernails, those perfect, treacherous moons. I miss the feeling that the world was bigger than my body, he said. Then I remember my job is to make his world bigger than my ego. That's a good job, I said. We packed boxes that afternoon. Another move, not out of fear now, but out of want. A small house near a small campus, a yard that needed a hand more than a checkbook, a neighborhood that judged you by how kindly your porch faced the street. On Michael's workbench sat the finished mobile, a tiny cosmos on a string. At its center, the fleck did its quiet work. Not power, perspective. A reminder that we aren't the only story in town, and that the only story that needs our whole hearts is the one we live inside. When Thomas woke from his nap, we stepped outside into a day that smelled like cut grass and clean sawdust and the inside of oranges when you first break them. We stood and watched the wind make a cathedral of leaves. I've seen the other side, Michael said, not to boast, not to confess, just to put a period where an ellipsis used to live. Everything I need is here. I leaned into him, into the shape our bodies make when they decide to be one thing again. Thomas fit between us like the third line of a chord. The mobile in the window turned. The house listened and decided to keep our secrets a while longer. We will tell Thomas some of it when he is old enough to understand that love sometimes looks like leaving and more often looks like staying. We will teach him the difference between curiosity and hunger. We will show him how to build beautiful things with ordinary tools. We will teach him to say no to invitations that glitter the wrong way. And one day when he asks about the picture on the fridge with the beetles, we will say, a friend reminded us to be small, and small saved us. We didn't save a world. We didn't break one either. We kept a promise across a river no one else can see, and we put our son to sleep under stars we could reach with a chair. There is an arch in a clearing that looks like any 2 stones leaning, nothing a tourist would photograph twice. In winter it rests. In summer it looks like shade. It is neither good nor evil. It is a door. We are the ones who decided how to live next to it.